Hey everyone, Raelan here. I am so excited, as always, to be able to help share another full recovery story. Today I chat with a woman named Sophie, who is originally from Germany, but now living in England. And her story and her journey has some really helpful and insightful things I think that people will appreciate hearing about. I mean, one, she was unwell, at times severe, for about 25 years. And this started for her when she was only 4 years old. And she really openly and honestly shares what that was like to be facing this kind of illness as a child. And she also dives into what she wishes of her parents, even though she understands they did the best they could, what she would have liked them to have done differently and what could have made this journey a little bit easier for her. And then she also fully recovered in one of the most unique ways that I have yet to hear about. So it's just really fascinating stuff. So let's dive right in. And I hope you find this interview to be as insightful and inspiring and informative as I do. Hey, Sophie, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Hi, Raelan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm good. How are you?
We're laughing a bit because we're having a bit of technical difficulties here. So we've started this interview 3 times now. But this time we're just going to power through and hope for the best, I think. So why don't you tell everyone where you are right now in the world?
I'm currently in Kent, which is the border to London in the UK.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I talked to quite a few folks in England. People comment on it quite a bit. It's not intentional. I'm not seeking out people in England, but I do seem to connect with a lot of people in England. So obviously we're here to talk about your chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, CFS journey. I'm very excited to hear about that. So as usual, I always try and start out with just hearing a bit about, how this all began for you and what things look like before you started becoming unwell. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I became unwell really early in my life. Like, I got ill when I was 4 years old. And I got fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And before that, I had the most amazing childhood. Like, I'm from a tiny little village and there are lots of goats and horses and animals. So I was basically running around playing in the mud with my friends all day. And I had this little tiny matte golden bicycle and I loved it. And I was cycling even to kindergarten by myself already because it was just down the road. So I had a really colorful, playful childhood before I got ill.
Did you say this started when you were 4?
Yes. 4, and I got only rid of it like 2.5 years ago. So it lasted 24 years.
Wow. So what did that look like at 4 years old? How did your parents recognize, or how did you recognize that something was going on?
Well, it all started with me having 4 times scarlet fever in 1 year. So I had antibiotics 4 times a year, which is like obviously a lot for anybody, but specifically for a child. And at the same time, my older sister, who is 18 years older than me, she moved out to study. But I, as a child, didn't really get that. For me, it was just the feeling of like my sister's leaving me and she doesn't want me and want to be around me. So I guess it was just a physical trauma as well as an emotional trauma in a way. And I have a bit of a disagreement with my parents actually when it started, because I was pretty sure that was the trigger and that's when things started to not be okay. But the first real symptoms when it got so bad that my parents started recognizing was 2 years later, when I started to complain about like pain in my feet and I could not wake up in the mornings. So I had to have about 5 alarm clocks, and all that happened was that my parents, one story below, woke up from them and had to get me out of bed to get me to go to school. But it all started with a lot of pain in my feet, and I had swollen feet. And over the years, it just got gradually worse until by the time I was 11, I think, I could hardly leave bed because I had pain everywhere, like severe in my hands, in my back, in my knees. And I had migraines and the fatigue on top of that. Yeah. But there was no diagnosis until I was 12.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. What were you thinking as a child when all this was happening? 'Cause I know sometimes when we're kids, we kind of just know what's normal to us. And what were you thinking throughout all of this?
Well, I guess I was very sporty. So for me, that was really, really hard because I was doing like roller skating. Like I was doing like the same you do in ice, like the dances on ice I did in roller skates. I was horseback riding. I was doing all kinds of things, and it got harder and harder. And I just remember after every training that I couldn't walk properly. And my parents tried everything to kind of make the rollerblades more comfortable. They started dragging me from doctor to doctor and nobody knew what's going on. And I was just really angry that I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And then the worst recommendation was, don't do the exercises you're doing. Stop doing your sports and your hobbies. And that was the absolute worst for me. And I couldn't participate in school in the sports anymore. And I knew that this is not, like, I knew the difference between me and my friends. I noticed that they can do all those things and I can't. And it gets worse and worse with every year. And it was just, I felt this incredible unfairness and anger. And it got more, the more the illness progressed, the more my anger progressed with it.
And what were doctors saying throughout all of this? What did they think was wrong?
All kinds of things. I think at first they thought because my feet were swollen as well. So at first it was saying that there's some form of inflammation, some form of water in my feet. Then there was a long journey of like, which I remember my mom telling me one day really vividly, where she said, the doctors just said, your child has nothing. And she almost had a nervous breakdown after hearing that, because that was already after me having pain and all these things for years and years on end, and nobody found anything. And they found some inflammation stuff in my blood, but that also wasn't really giving them a complete picture. So it was like a big question mark. And then it started that, actually the interesting thing, very early on, one of the doctors said it could be fibromyalgia, but it got immediately dismissed again by the boss of this doctor. It was in a clinic. And so he was made shut up. So there would have been a diagnosis much earlier, but then it just got dismissed. And then I was put into the whole, she's making this up direction. So I was then, before I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia again in a rheumatology with 12, I was actually locked away in a psychiatry, because they really believe that I'm pretending to be ill and in pain to get attention. And my parents were so desperate, they had no idea what to do anymore. So they trusted that this is the right thing to do, and only figured out what a psychiatry really means once they didn't have any power over me anymore and couldn't even visit me.
So what happened from there?
So there, after 2 weeks, luckily a psychologist said, this girl has no mental health issues. She didn't believe that I was making this up. So I was very, very lucky that I had this woman talking to me. And she said, like, let's get her to a rheumatologist. And then I was transferred into a rheumatology clinic. And there they came up with a diagnosis and said, this is fibromyalgia. And then the next news of like, cool, we have nothing we can do about this. So even I finally had a diagnosis, it was absolutely worth nothing.
Wow. And you were how old at this time?
12, just about 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't able to go to school? You were at home?
Yeah. So this year, like, I missed so many school days. I had to repeat a year because I was just mainly in bed. Like, I try to be in school. I remember very often that I managed the first 1 or 2 lessons in the day. If I managed to get out of bed, there were many mornings where I just was too exhausted. I couldn't even get to school. But most of the time in the first school break, my parents had to pick me up because I was like in tears, in pain, and I couldn't stay any longer. And so I was basically watching life in the crucial years when you kind of start to go out with friends. And like when I was 13, 14, and they told me how it is to go to the cinema alone for the first time. And I was just hearing all about it, and I wasn't part of that world. And I started to be really isolated from everything, because I also had the choice between, am I choosing to go 2 hours to class and try to be in a school, or am I not? And maybe then I can see a friend for an hour before my energy's done and I'm in pain for the next 3 days because I dare to move.
I'm so grateful, Sophie, that you're sharing all of this. I just can't even believe this. I'm having such a sort of physical reaction to this story. It's just so heartbreaking, and it seems so unfair that any child should have to go through all of this. And I'm grateful because, for many reasons, but you and I connected in my Facebook group, and I'm sure you've seen we've got some parents in there of children who have ME/CFS, and I can't even imagine. I don't even know what to say to people who are dealing with children who are facing this illness. So thank you for sharing.
Actually,
this. How does it feel?
Sorry that I'm interrupting. I think, it was absolutely terrible, but I am fine today. It's all gone. I finally have a life, and now I can actually help. So that's why I'm thinking I wouldn't be the person I am today if I wouldn't have had that. And so, Yeah, of course, it was terrible, but I'm grateful because I got through it, and now I can be useful in helping people, and especially parents. Like, my parents made so many mistakes. So if you want, if we have some minutes, maybe I could share a little bit about what I wished my parents would have known, if that would be helpful.
Oh, that would be incredibly helpful. Why don't we do that now?
Yeah, cool. So my parents are incredibly loving parents. They tried everything. And that was one of the biggest mistakes they made. They dragged me from doctor, to clinic, to alternative medicine, to therapists, to healers, to anything they could bloody find. And by doing that, they forgot to see me. All they saw was the illness their daughter has and something they try to fix. And one of my healing journeys was to actually rebel so hard against them that they leave me alone, and that everybody leaves me alone with this. So because the focus started to be so strong on the illness and not on me, I was not seen anymore. That's how it felt. People in school, when they asked me, how are you doing? I got aggressive because all I wanted was to be normal. Normal is a stupid word because what is normal? But I just wanted to be not in pain and just seen as everybody else. And I think if I could go back and could give my parents some tips, I would be like, encourage me to do stuff. Don't help me give into this illness. Don't bring everything to my bed if I can't get up. Help me that I can at least do the little bits I can. Like, I was holding forks and stuff with my wrists because I couldn't hold it with my fingers because it was too painful. So my parents gave me like plastic forks and stuff and spoons. And in the worst case, they would make things that I don't have to hold it with my hands at all. Like, I can have with straws, soup or something. And they would have helped me. But sometimes they would take it to my bed. And sometimes I wish they would have at least say, like, go down to the kitchen, sit on a table. And so that encouragement to see, like, focus on the things you can still do and don't focus on the things you can't. That was one element that was really going wrong. Then the next thing, hopefully that would be better, because hopefully today people wouldn't think you do that because you want attention, and hopefully because you know more about it, that also your peers understand it more. But the whole isolation aspect, I wasn't very well taken care of with that isolation. My parents tried, but you need friends in your age. And sometimes maybe it would have been better to even say, you know what, skip school today, see your friends in the afternoon, and help me not to blame myself. And also, like, I had moments where it was suddenly better, and then I could do stuff, and then suddenly I crashed. But then I was accused of, like, oh, see, you make this up, because just now it was gone. So I was almost scared of allowing it to be okay in moments. So I started to just, like, completely hide with everything. And all those elements, I think, to really understand all those, the social impact, the psychological impact, but also I was going into teenagerhood. A lot of things with, like, parents and teenagers happen. So I think parents need to be incredibly understanding on so many layers and listen to what the children actually need. What do they want? Just talk to them.
What great points. And I can see, from a parent's perspective, how you'd be so hyper-focused on just fixing this and finding a cure. And, the number one thing I have to do as a parent is go to every specialist that exists, and I need to get this resolved. I can see how your childhood could just get swallowed up. And what an interesting point about every time that you were feeling good or feeling, kind of normal, it almost became scared to show that to people because you're going to have a price to pay, because then you're going to get more accusations that you're faking. And wow, it's tough as an adult. I'm sure you appreciate more than the average person to deal with these things and to keep your head in the right place. So I can only imagine as a teenager or as an adolescent how you're supposed to. Well,
I guess the good thing is, like, at least I didn't have to worry about bills. Like, the advantage of me having it so early was at least that some day-to-day struggles adults might have today, I didn't have. Mm-hmm. So, of course, it is a essential phase where you're growing up and you're supposed to do definitely other things than being ill in bed. But I think it's just a complete different challenge. But I don't know if it's any easier if you have that as an adult, because then you maybe have less support from the outside because, you're an adult.
So I'm assuming that you did, because I know that you're doing research on ME/CFS, and we'll get into that a little bit more later on. But so eventually you did get a diagnosis of ME/CFS or something in that umbrella?
I got fibromyalgia, diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and that chronic fatigue came with it. Was said that extreme fatigue is part of it. It was never a separate diagnosis. It was always like, because you have fibromyalgia, you have this extreme fatigue.
And I think many of us, myself included sometimes, I don't like to think that I am this way, but we get a little bit too caught up in the diagnosis And, I just had Dan Newford on my channel recently. I think you
saw
saw it. And he was talking about this, whether it's fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or NE or POTS, or there's just a whole bunch that fall under this sort of, and he was saying it's all the same thing. Different things trigger it, and we're going to have slightly different paths out of it. But getting really hung up on, what letters we're attaching to our experience isn't such a big thing. Not as big as we think.
I actually think a diagnosis can have dangers. Like for me, one of the things was I didn't want to identify with it. And I think there is a real danger if you do, if you make the illness your life. And I think one of the things I did intuitively right as a child was to basically rebel against the label of having a disability. Like I would have been counted as 50% disabled, which would have helped my parents financially. But I didn't want it. I didn't want that status. So my parents luckily didn't give in to that. Or 30%. Don't quote me on percentage. I'm always wrong with them. But it was enough to have a disability pass, and I didn't want to have it. And one of the things that did help me to just say I'm healthy, I have nothing, which drove my mom sometimes crazy because I was sitting in front of a medical professional and he was asking me how I'm doing. And if I felt good in that moment, I was like, I'm fine. I have nothing. And my mom's like, she was in bed and couldn't move in pain for the whole bloody week. Is I'm fine. But I think in that child stubbornness, there's some really good advice of if you believe that you're fine, it's definitely helping. You can't think your way out of this. But I think it's an essential part that I never accepted this diagnosis. I never did.
Yeah, I love that you came to that even as a child. And it reminds me when I got diagnosed because, as I've talked about a lot, my mother also had chronic fatigue syndrome, and it was just the worst fate imaginable for me. So my doctor knew, because he knew my history, the doctor that eventually ended up being the one who was helpful for me and who diagnosed me. And he knew that diagnosis was going to be a bad thing for me. And he didn't want to give it to me, but we needed it for paperwork, for insurance, for work. And he's like, do not let this, settle in. Do not take this in. It's just, for me, it was, I think, going through something similar. I'm like, I don't want this a part of me. I don't want this.
What an amazing doctor.
I'm determined to get past it. And if I internalize that.
Yeah. But brilliant. I mean, wow, that is, I haven't heard of a doctor like that, I have to say, but I'm glad that you had such a doctor. That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's one of the ways that I got fortunate that I found him fairly quickly. My family doctor that I've been seeing wasn't so informed or so helpful, but I found him quite fast. And he didn't have all the answers for me, but he had what I needed at the time, which was just someone who was a support for me as I went through it, and helped me brainstorm things and helped me explore things to try, and kept giving me hope, and pointed me in the right direction and told me things to research. And so, I'm forever grateful for him. Dr. Hoffman in Calgary, Alberta, if anyone's curious.
That's wonderful.
Anyways, so the first plug I've ever given him in all my time I've been talking about this. I should have mentioned that sooner. Anyways, so back to you. So what happened? We left off somewhere when you were a teenager. So how did things progress for you?
So the only useful advice I ever got from a doctor was go to Lanzarote, which is for Canary Islands. And I was 13 and I went there for the first time. And I have no idea how or why until this day, but I got off the airplane and my pain was gone. And it just stayed away. So I have no idea, and I cannot explain this to you. I really wish I could, but climate was such an important thing for me. And the absurd thing before that, we were in Tunisia and in Egypt, and in one of those two, I ended up in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk anymore in pain. And then I go to Lanzarote and I leave the airplane and I feel nothing. And I remember starting to cry in the airport, and my mom cried with me because I could just walk without any issue, without any pain. And I was crying now thinking about it. And I ended up staying by myself in a guest family on Lanzarote because my parents couldn't find a job there. And I said, I'm not coming back. I'm not going back home to Germany. So at first, my mom stayed with me for 2 months, and then my dad until they found a guest family where I could stay. And then with the age of just about 13, 14, I actually ended up living without my parents, went to school where I didn't speak the language, but I had a life for the first time since I was 4 years old again.
What an amazing story you have. This is incredible. You can't make this stuff up. This is mind-blowing. And forgive my ignorance, I don't know where this place is that you keep referring to.
That's no worries. It's the Canary Islands. It's part of Spain. It's like these little islands next to Fuerteventura and like Gran Canaria and all those things. And so I was there for almost 2 years.
Yes.
And then the next catastrophe hit. I started to faint every second day, roughly. I just like collapsed out. And that forced me back to Germany because the doctors in Spain didn't find what was going on now. And I was tired of another thing that happened, but I could rebel as much as I wanted to. My parents said, like, you come back home. And then they didn't find out what's going on other than that my pulse dropped to like 24 beats per minute without a reason. It just like dropped and I fainted. And I had to go back to Germany. So my fibromyalgia came back, my fatigue came back, everything came back. Plus I had the heart issue. So that was the next big hit then. And you can imagine what that did to my mental health. So by that point, I was depressed. I was suicidal. So it was like a long, long list of things. I had to repeat 2 years in school because they somehow didn't accept my Spanish school reports, even though that was all handled before. And so that was a real low point. And only 2 years later, they found out that I must have had a heart muscle infection because there's a scar in my heart. But they didn't find that at the time. They just managed to give me medication to stabilize my heart. But they had no idea what was going on.
Everybody's stories fascinates me. And there's so many unique things that go with each of them. There's often a lot of similarities. But yours is just, I'm kind of speechless. I don't even know what to say about this. This is quite the life.
It was a roller coaster.
So how are you feeling at this point about recovery? Like, did you have hope still of getting past this? Or where was your mind at? No.
Actually, the first time I was suicidal about it was when I was 7. And when I was 7, because I was so in pain at 7, but by the time I was 16, it got really, really bad. I don't say that much on camera, but this time I do. I tried to kill myself. And I'm glad it didn't happen. I'm glad I was stopped and I was put back into psychiatry again, this time for good reasons. But wasn't a much better experience, not helpful either. But I had no hope. And actually, I was angry that I had an illness that just tortures. I actually sometimes secretly wished, why don't I have an illness that at least kills me in a few years? Like, why do I have to have this that's not going to kill me? Because it's not a severe illness in that sense. And I just have to have it for how long? And no hope. I was saying the only thing that kind of kept me alive was because I was stubborn as hell. I got that from my dad, I think. And that stubbornness basically saved me because even though I had no hope, I was also too stubborn to give up after that one attempt. Which also had to do with antidepressant addiction because I was stuffed with medication. And one of the things somebody did was like, here, let's give her antidepressants. Let's not care that she's a teenager and that this is medication you shouldn't be given before somebody is an adult and that the side effect is literally saying suicide. And she gave me the medication to me, not to my parents. And she said, be responsible with it. And what happened was I started overdosing because it did switch me off. It didn't do anything better. It just like made me not be here. But that wore off after a while. So I ended up in medication addiction. And that's how the suicide thing came about. And so after that, once the medication was gone, I had my stubbornness back. And therefore, at least I was too stubborn to give up from that moment on.
Wow. I love that you can laugh about it now. It's the only thing that makes, because this is just such a heartbreaking story to hear. And so I'm so sorry, Sophie, that you've had to go through all of this. But I see you now and I see that you're smiling and happy and doing well. And it doesn't, I don't know how it's going to feel for people who are watching, but even right now, me knowing that I know you're okay, it feels like there's no way she came back from this. Like there's no way anyone is coming back from this. God. So, well, it just sounds so intense. I don't mean that in any kind of way, just that it was such an intense journey of struggle and significant illness, starting from such a young age, with it sounds like virtually no hope from, I've heard now, from like age 4 to 16, it just kept getting worse. So how did you start to turn this around, or what did things look like from there?
So again, the first thing I said was like, I rebelled against every doctor. I refused to see any more medical professionals. I refused to get help. I refused to give up. And I decided actually always what I wanted to be is an actress. So I will be an actress and I will not finish my school degree because I'm going to go to drama school. My parents said until this day, if I would have had a healthy childhood, they would have never allowed me to, at this point, actually audition for drama school before I finished my high school degree. But because I had such a journey, they said, yeah, whatever. And they didn't believe that I would get in anyway. But I did get in. I don't know until this day how I did it, but I got in despite everything. And I lied on the application form. I said, yep, healthy, physically, mentally, yes, even though I wasn't. And then I just stopped school after secondary school with a secondary school degree, moved out at 17 again, basically lived by myself in a flat share in Cologne and studied acting, which was only possible because the classes started in the afternoon. Like it started from 2 p.m. until 10 p.m. So I could basically sleep from 11 p.m. at night until 12 in the next day, get myself up, go to drama school. And between 16 and 19, the pain started to get less. So the pain started to have mainly an effect on winter and rain season. So it was a bit better. In summer, there were some phases where it was gone. That just naturally somehow started to happen. Mm-hmm. But when I was in drama school, it was not gone at all. It was absolutely terrible. I fought my way through and I got kicked out of drama school after 2 years with the information you're too ill for this job. So I was not good enough in hiding it. So I learned that was the next thing. I faked that I'm good. I became really good in hiding my pain. But when you saw it, it meant I was close to like fainting. And it did happen quite often. Like I couldn't dance as much as everybody else. Acrobatics was an absolute nightmare for me. I was very lucky that I never looked as tired as I felt. So I could have flickery eyes all day and like had no idea how to keep them actually up or like leave alone listening and interacting. But I looked like I'm right awake. So that was always my plus. So I started just faking it. And I said to everyone, I am healthy. And I refused. If anybody ever questioned my health, oh my God, I became such a horrible person. And I had like my claws out immediately and be like, no, I'm not. I'm absolutely fine. Leave me alone. I'm very sorry for some of those moments. I surely am. But I think just like, oh yeah. And I forgot another thing. I started reading everything I could about psychology. Because I got diagnosed with depression and like all kinds of psychological stuff without real explanation. So I was like, cool, if nobody else helps me, then I'm helping myself. So I started reading everything I could. And I was like, okay, cool. So if that's the issue, how can I get out of it? And then everything I absorbed on the way, like from drama school, we had a lot of reflective exercises. So I started using those to reflect, to get myself happier, healthier in a mental sense. So I actually managed to have life, to feel life, even though I wasn't healthy. But at least once the heaviness of the depression was lifted and the suicidal stuff was lifted, at least I could be a bit happy, even though I was still in horrendous pain. But I also started chasing my dream. I did what I always wanted to do since I was a child. And that just pushed me to kind of get better no matter what. And by the time I got kicked out of drama school, my pain was still there and the fatigue was still horrendous, and I could have never worked a 9-to-5 job, leave alone actually being an actress, which I refused to accept. But it did get better by itself towards the end of my teenager years. And yeah, but a big thing was to just like live in a way, despite everything.
All right, so I'm insanely curious because I actually don't even know, because we haven't talked about this in detail before this interview, as you know. So how did you finally get past this? What did you do?
So I think the next thing, so a couple years later, so I managed to actually like have a completely different circle of life of friends, because I also had attracted quite unhealthy people because I had no self-worthiness myself and I had just the wrong circle of friends. And I had to break out of my social life, and I moved to Berlin and I met actual people who were supportive. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a burden on somebody. So I could actually tell them like, tonight I'm in horrendous pain. I'm not going to go out with you. Leave alone, I could never go out because I have had also a severe allergic reaction to cigarette smoke, and everybody was smoking everywhere. So I was excluded still from my social life anyway. Besides, I could have never survived a night partying. So having friends that are actually supportive, where I could be more honest, made it a bit easier. But then I had a massive relapse when I was like 23, 24 with a pain. So I was back in bed. Everything was absolutely horrible again. And then a friend of mine read that veganism helps with fibromyalgia. And I didn't want to know anything about what people think about that illness, because I didn't think that anybody would finally move away from this whole, oh, this is in your head idea. So I had no idea what anybody was thinking at that time about that illness. But she convinced me to give it a go. And I tried being a vegan for a month and my pain was gone. And so I said, cool, I'm going to stay a vegan Fast forward to now, you can do a lot of wrong with veganism. Be careful. I actually had to fix a lot of things I did wrong starting last year, like restoring my gut health. And now this year, introducing fish oil, and I'm eating eggs again. And I cut out wheat and sugar as much as I could. So I did adjust my diet a lot later on. But what remained then was only the fatigue. And the fatigue I could manage. I could hide being unwell as much as I could. I had way too much coffee. I took way too many supplements. Like, I just bombarded myself with like iron, vitamin D3, and it felt like when I overdosed on those, I had like a tad of energy in between. And I always arranged my jobs, and I arranged everything I did in a way that I could always nap whenever I needed. So I was working a lot from home. Like after like failing to complete my acting degree, I actually started studying screenwriting, and I did voice courses, and I had my first job as a screenwriter, but luckily from home. So I had like 14-hour work days, but in those I had 5 hours on and off with naps. So that's why I had to work longer in the day so that I managed to even finish the things I had to finish. But in between I kept crashing, but nobody saw me. So it was okay. And the very last thing I did, that was only, so in 2018, it got super bad again. I had only 3 hours a day where I could focus. Other than that, flickering eyes, being really, really unwell. And in those 3 hours, all I did was working as a voice actress in order to pay my bills. And then I met somebody who told me about something called Cambo. So if you thought my story is crazy, no, this is the craziest part. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Cambo before?
No, Cambo?
Yeah. So it is a shamanic healing. It is not psychedelic. So it's not like ayahuasca. It's absolutely unpleasant. It's frog poison. And you get little burns, mostly on your arm. And then the skin gets rubbed open and poison gets put on. And it triggers an insane detox reaction because obviously you're just poisoned and your body does everything to get rid of the poison. And I did 3 of those sessions in the middle of a jungle in Thailand, knowing that the only risk with Cambo is you shouldn't do it when you have a heart issue. So I did have a heart issue. But at that point, I said, like, I'm either coming out there healthy or dead. There is no other option anymore. And I told it to my parents. I said, like, Mom, Dad, if I'm not coming back alive from Thailand, that's fine. Then that was meant to be. But if I have anything else to do in this world, then I'm going to survive this craziness. And I did. And 3 sessions later, all gone. And never came back since, except the post-viral fatigue for 2 months, but that's gone as well.
How did you... So many questions. How did you hear about this? How did you even think to do this?
Well, it was a friend of mine, and he said he did Cambo against depression, but he heard that this helps against all kinds of things. And my first reaction was like, no. I don't do anything like that. I don't do drugs. I don't do psychedelics. Like, no, leave me alone. He's like, no, hold on. It's not psychedelic. It's actually not fun. So I looked it up, and the more I looked it up, the more I thought, damn, this could be it. And then I talked to my sister, and she's a physiologist. And she said, like, well, in a way, everything's poison. We just managed to control it, that we know it doesn't kill you, unlike this. And this is not controlled. And if you had a heart issue, this might actually kill you. But yeah, I see why this could also have a positive effect because it shocks the body. It sets free all kinds of physical reactions. It did make some sense. There are some studies. There is some things is known about what the shamans call medicine. And one of my next episodes is actually with a Cambo practitioner who really learned it. So she talks a lot about those things for everybody who's like, this is crazy. I want to know more about it first. There is some information out there. But yeah, after all of those things, I talked to the shaman my friend did it with because I thought, okay, he survived. So I have a good chance to that it just goes well. And also, like, I keep saying survive. It's not known that people die from this. It's not really a thing, but there was a risk.
Yeah, I can see. It feels a bit, just to put it mildly, a little bit makes you a little bit nervous. Like, I'm going to go to the jungle in Thailand with a shaman and have him inject frog poison into my arms. Like, what could go wrong?
Exactly. I mean, it was only in Thailand because he usually was in Berlin at that time. He happened to be in Thailand for half a year. So you could have also done it very casually in a flat in Berlin. The practitioner I'm talking to, She is in London. So it's not a thing. You don't have to make it a big ritual. It's just happened to be
Okay.
that person was there at that time. And if you're already in a jungle, he said it's the best place to do it. So I thought like, okay, whatever. Yes.
So what did you think, Sophie, when you were better after this? What was going through your head?
Oh my goodness. So when I went to Thailand, my mom insisted on coming with me, by the way. I didn't tell her when I did cambo because I thought like, I don't want her to worry if her daughter is dying right now. So she thought I'm just sleeping in the morning. And I told her afterwards that I actually just had a session. And so in the run up to this, I was so exhausted in Thailand that the first session we had to delay it in some hours, and I had to drink coconut water because you're not eating 12 hours before. And I hardly managed to make it to the jungle. That's how bad it was. And then after that, I was sleeping the whole day. So it's not a very long process. It's like it lasts for maybe half an hour to an hour, and then you're actually okay. But I slept the rest of the day. And the next day I woke up and I had a bowl of fruits. And I could feel that my body was doing something with that food it wasn't doing before. Like I was insisting for years that my body is not processing vitamins the way it's supposed to. Actually, I'm learning more about that at the moment. But back then I had no actual proof that this might be really a thing. But I could feel that my body suddenly took something from that fruit it didn't do before. I didn't have to eat anything else for the whole day. I was full the whole day. And I had energy for most of the day. Not the whole day. And I still collapsed in the evening. After the second session, and that was, oh my God. I slept for 4 hours. I woke up without an alarm clock for the first time since I was 6 years old. I didn't need an alarm clock, and I didn't need to fight for like 3-4 hours to get out of bed. I just opened my eyes and I was awake. And I was shocked. I thought I'm not awake. I thought this must be a dream because it was so incredible that I thought like, this can't be. This can't be. And then I was fine the whole day. I was fine. I went on a tour with my mom and I climbed up a waterfall and I was running around all day and I didn't crash. I had nothing, absolutely nothing. And it stayed. And then after the third session, the third session almost felt like it was good to do, but not necessary anymore. But I think it was the right thing to do 3 times. After that, you could really feel that the calling is done. Like after 3 times, I really was like, I'm not doing that again unless I have a very, very, very good reason. But it was gone. And then the absurd thing was after that, I got a shock. After that, I suddenly realized I don't know what life is without fighting every day. So it took me another 6 months to unlearn coping mechanism and to learn what it is to live without a fight. And 2019 was the best year of my life.
Wow. I don't know what else to say. The more people I interviewed, I'm starting to think like, not like I've heard it all. It's not like I've talked to that many people, but I've heard a lot of things. But wow, there's just so many ways that people get past these different things. It's so fascinating. And so you had 2019 and you were great. And then 2020 hit, which was a rough year for all of us. So you mentioned post-viral fatigue. Did you get sick again or what happened?
So, 2020, it was a bit mean. Because 2019, I was the first time on stage without any worries. It was the best day of my entire life because there's nothing better than being on a stage. And then, so it was a bit mean that suddenly I couldn't continue on that path because there was no theater. But I was okay. Entire 2020, I was actually surprised. No major psychological issues came up. I had nothing to deal with. I was just fine. If anything, it was maybe good to not be out 24/7 again and to actually have some free time. Because in 2019, oh my God, nothing could hold me in. I was out so much and did so many things and nothing could stop me. I really overdid it in a positive way. But then December last year, I got the flu. Not COVID. The whole household was tested negative, but I got the actual flu. And I was floored until February, end of February. And that terrified the hell out of me. I was ready to go into cambo again. That's how bad it was. I thought I'm never doing it again, but I was very close to just calling up the person I know to be like, can I ignore the COVID rules and come over and you do a session with me because I don't know what else to do anymore. But luckily, it left. In natural ways. Diet did a lot to support it. But end of February, I realized, no, okay, this is just post-viral fatigue. This is going all by itself. It's not turning into anything long-term. And now it's all good. Again, all good, gone, and I'm super grateful.
Oh, amazing. Oh, this is so incredible. I am so happy for you. This is just really, really, yeah, so inspiring. So exciting. What a journey. Ah.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of tired. I'm up, I'm down, I'm up. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. It's been on a roller coaster. I can only imagine.
Certainly was.
So I know you're doing some research now, which I mentioned briefly earlier in our chat. So can you tell us a bit about your research and what led you to do this? And
yeah, I'll try to be a bit briefer than with the whole story. I know I'm talking a lot. People kept saying like, you should share this. You should share your story. Write a book. Do something. And I always thought like, nah. And then I thought, actually, why am I not? Because I have actually maybe something to say that could help people. Why am I not doing this? Then at least this journey had a meaning and a sense and a usefulness. So I just decided to do that, my own channel, which is called The Puzzle of Healing, because that's what I start to understand these illnesses to be. They are a puzzle, and there is no one thing that heals you. There are maybe some common elements, but however you calm down your nervous system, because that I think what Cambo did. Cambo reset my nervous system. And now I'm hearing all these people talking about that this is a nervous system thing. It's pretty cool to actually, because that's what I started thinking without any evidence or knowledge. And I did not do my own research like so many other people. I just didn't want to hear about it. But I think that's what happened. It reset my nervous system. So I decided I'm going to share my own story, but I want to talk to as many practitioners and recovered patients as I can to introduce puzzle pieces. Anything that helped someone could help somebody else. And it doesn't matter what I'm thinking about it. Like, for example, I would never do actual psychedelics. But if I meet tomorrow somebody that says, actually, ayahuasca healed me, I want to hear and share that story. Because just because I don't like it, it doesn't mean that I don't want to hold it back from others. And so through that, because I just talked to people, not about specific illnesses. So I talked to people who help curing musicians' vocal dystonia, or a doctor who talked about like the doctor-patient communication. And they actually inspired me to, especially Anna Detari, who talked about musicians' vocal dystonia, inspired me to study psychology, to look at it from a professional point of view. Theaters are closed. Yes, I still have my job as a voice actress, but there was nothing else to do in a way. So I thought, that's the only year. I'm not going to regret this because I'm taking the time away from theater. So I applied, and somehow, I have no idea how, got into an MSc degree in psychology. It's a conversion course. And it's a 1-year course, and it's full on. And for my dissertation, I decided I'm going to participate to the research in ME/CFS. And I decided I'm going to do what pretty much nobody did yet, which is talking to recovered patients, because I'm not interested in what we already know, which is like that people around. So the thing that interests me most, because my parents made those mistakes from a very loving point of view, and I would never blame them for it. Mm-hmm. I thought, okay, so the people around us have a massive influence. And I know that if partners or parents don't even believe the illness, that has a very negative influence. And the other hand, if they are overly supportive, that has a negative influence. So I thought, okay, what did patients and partners do different for those where they recovered? So I'm talking to couples. I'm talking to recovered patients plus their significant other to just hear their journey and to just analyze later. It's a qualitative study. It's like semi-structured, so I'm not leading anything in my questions. And once I have all those answers, I'm going to like analyze the themes and see if I can find commonalities. And if I can find something, I then can conclude that must be something that is actually helping and supporting. Because I think it's also hard on a partner. And I think we should not forget that oh my God, I can't imagine being a parent having that. I was almost happy that I was the patient, because watching somebody suffer you love, I don't know how long I could do that actually. So I hope that with that research, I can participate to helping people to find out how they can cope as couples as well and make it better. Yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Incredible. And I haven't heard of anyone looking at that angle. So I think that's really important. We don't talk about it much at all. I don't hear much about it when I'm, reading books or talking to different people. It's, our relationships and the people around us can make a huge difference, or the lack thereof.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is known. I mean, it is known that a lot of people like lose their circle of friends, lose their partners, and it is known what impact that can have on your mental health and therefore on the condition. But I can't blame anybody for leaving, even though I really want to say, like, don't leave your friends, don't leave your partners who are ill, but I can't blame them. This must be hell for them as well.
I really can't either. And, watching my parents go through this when I was growing up and a teenager and into early adulthood, I really felt for both of them, and I would have had zero judgment. In fact, for a long time, I kind of wanted them to separate because I just saw the stressful situation that they were in. It just didn't seem to be helping anybody. So yeah.
I
hear what you're saying. So I usually finish up these chats with people as we kind of wrap up here and wanting to know what they took away from this whole experience. And I don't imagine it's something that's easy to sum up, but if you have, any takeaways from this or any advice for other people going through this, I'm just curious what you'd have to say.
Trust your gut. I think patients actually know what they need. And if you trust yourself and if you actually, dare to ask the hardest questions you can imagine. I asked myself, are the others right? Do I make this up? Do I want attention? Yes or no? Because if that's a yes, then at least I have something to do and face and deal with, even though I would probably feel terribly guilty. But dare to ask the hardest questions you can imagine. Because if there is anything you're holding on to, you need to get rid of, you need to dare to ask that. And I think the longer you're ill, the more you're getting used to living ill. And the longer you're developing patterns that help you cope, and the harder it is to imagine that how is life without it? And maybe that triggers a fear and that helps you holding on to the illness because you don't even have an image anymore. So I would say dare to ask if you fell into that. Be kind to yourself because that's a coping mechanism that keeps you alive. But dare to ask those questions from a purely, I know this is not a purely psychological issue, and I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there is a massive component and that can help you a lot in your journey. So use it. Use it, trust yourself, and don't listen to anybody who tells you can't get rid of this. If you think you can, I'm pretty sure you damn can. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and especially being able to look at your life and your thoughts and your behaviors and kind of, I say like as an anthropologist or a detective, just a sort of detached way where you're not judging yourself. It's just like a puzzle. Like, let's just look at all the pieces and let's just really be honest and, no self-shaming, no criticism, no anything. And I had to do that too. There was a book I read, and now I can't remember which one, but it prompted me to ask myself some of these questions, things like, what am I getting from this? Is there a part of me that likes being sick? And even just like thinking that would make me just feel physically ill because I loathed this entire illness, but I had to really think about it. And when I got really honest with myself, I realized that there was benefits. Oh my goodness, it still hurts to say, but there were benefits to being sick. So I had to think about those. And then once I acknowledged what they were, things like expectations of me were lower. I didn't have to be this over the top perfectionist. I didn't have to work 24/7. I got to have a more dialed back way of living my life. So I had to start to, do visualization exercises and different things where I started to imagine a future of me being well and still being able to hold on to those things. Because I do think those things can hold you back. It might just be a little tiny part of your brain that is holding on to those thoughts. Yeah. But how powerful is that part of your brain? Like, how much is it controlling of your recovery? It might be a protective thing where it's like, we make you well again and you're going to go back into those old patterns and it's going to be worse for us. So we're just going to keep you here.
Exactly. Absolutely. So for me, it was like, I was a relief because for me, the answer was clearly no. I always try to hide with it. I don't want attention. There is nothing that wants me to be ill. But my biggest fear was of not getting well, but thinking I do. And that's what was holding me back for a while, because I thought the worst thing that could happen is a relapse, because I was generally thinking I'm not going to survive one. And now when I had the thing in December, I thought like, oh my goodness, is that it? And it was really hard not to slip back into various old patterns. But luckily it didn't, because I don't know if I would have gotten out of the fatigue again that quickly if I would have slipped back. But it is work. And being healthy is work. And that's also not to underestimate. Like, being healthy takes time, at least if you're ill for that long, to, again, unlearn all those things you did, like fighting every day. It was hard to understand what is not fighting. And it was beautiful once I realized that I can live without fighting.
Incredible. I'm so happy for you, Sophie. This is amazing.
Thank you
so much. 1,000 times over, thank you for taking the time to share this with us today or on my channel. If people want to reach you, if they want to find you, how can they do that?
Well, have a look for The Puzzle of Healing. It's a channel on YouTube. I'm on all social media stuff, so you can find me pretty much anywhere. Or if you want to connect on Facebook, you can also find me, my name, Sophie Helbig. But I guess it's a better bet to just go through The Puzzle of Healing, and that's directly a contact to me.
Okay, great. And of course, these will all be in the video description, so people can just scroll through and see which way they want to connect. Wonderful. Well, and as always, people watching, really excited to hear your comments on this one. Has anybody else had this happen? I would love to know if other people have had success with the same sort of treatment approach. And just, any thoughts? And I'm sure Sophie would be happy, myself as well, to answer comments that you have here.
Oh, yeah.
In the video description as well. Well, wonderful. And for people who are interested in seeing more stories like Sophie's, I've got a playlist that'll link up here on the screen somewhere where I've got tons of more interviews of other people who were facing significant illness and fully recovered. So that's it. Thank you to everyone who's watching for your participation and all that you contribute to the channel. As always, thanks again, Sophie. And
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.